Tonight, we once again dive deep into the universe of Metroid without the need of a controller or a power-up. But first, if you enjoy this cozy tale, please don't forget to unleash a super missile on that like button, or make it a power bomb and hit the notification bell as well. It helps others discover the channel and join our ranks of weary dreamers. And please share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your suggestions for future content. But for now, get cozy and enjoy tonight's expedition into the mysterious world of Metroid. The charged particles of the ion storm cast an unnatural purple glow across the jagged landscape of K2L. Twisted metal structures, once the proud framework of a Federation mining colony, now resembled the skeletal remains of some ancient beast. The planet's surface, scarred by plasma burns and impact craters, had remained largely untouched in the decades since the space pirate raid that had left no survivors. No survivors, save one. Samus Aran stood at the edge of a ridge overlooking what had once been the colony's central plaza. Her Varia suit gleamed in the intermittent flashes of the storm, orange and red against the darkening sky. The suit's environmental systems hummed softly, filtering the planet's thin atmosphere and neutralizing the harmful effects of the ionized particles that threatened to disrupt her systems. Inside the helmet, Samus's eyes narrowed slightly as she surveyed the ruins. Her HUD viewer displayed atmospheric readings, structural analyses, and threat assessments in cool blue text that scrolled along the periphery of her vision. So far, nothing registered as immediately dangerous, but experience had taught her that planets were rarely as abandoned as they appeared. She had not intended to return to K2L. A navigation error during a hyperspace jump, compounded by the unexpected ion storm, had forced her to make an emergency landing. The gunship's systems needed time to recalibrate, and the storm's interference made immediate departure impossible. 2 hours, according to the ship's AI. 2 hours on the planet where everything had been taken from her. Samus descended the ridge with practiced efficiency, the subtle enhancements of her suit allowing her to move gracefully despite its apparent bulk. Each step was deliberate, testing the ground before committing her weight. The storms on K2L had been known to create sinkholes in the unstable terrain, a detail she remembered not from personal experience, but from the Federation archives she had studied obsessively in her younger years. The Central Plaza had once been a hub of activity, a place where miners gathered after shifts, where supplies were distributed, where community events brought together the small but tight-knit population. Now, only the durable foundation remained, cracked and warped by heat and time. Samus paused at what might have once been a fountain. Her scanner revealed trace elements of decorative afluoraltite, the mineral that had drawn colonists to K2L in the first place, the same mineral that had drawn the pirates. A distant, hollow boom echoed across the ruins, causing Samus to drop into a defensive crouch, arm cannon raised. Her combat instincts, honed through countless battles, responded before conscious thought. The scanner built into her visor swept the area, seeking the source of the disturbance. Structural collapse detected, 247 meters northeast. No biological signatures, just another piece of the colony surrendering to time and gravity. Samus lowered her weapon, but remained alert. The sound had stirred something in her memory. Something about the way thunder used to echo through the colony's buildings during storms. Her mother had called it the planet's heartbeat. She pushed the thought away. This mission, unplanned as it was, required focus, not reminiscence. She needed to find shelter while her ship recalibrated. The ion storm was intensifying, and even her suit had limitations. The colony's main administrative building seemed the most intact option. Its reinforced structure, designed to withstand the planet's frequent storms, had fared better than the residential sectors. Samus moved toward it, her steps raising small clouds of dust that swirled in the electrically charged air. As she approached, her scanner detected movement. Something small and fast, darting between debris piles. Samus froze, tracking the motion with minute movements of her head. Her visor zoomed in on the source. K to L tunneler, subterranean omnivore, threat level, low. The creature resembled a cross between a scorpion and a mole, with an iridescent blue-black carapace and specialized front claws for burrowing through K2L's mineral-rich soil. It paused, sensing her presence despite her stillness. 6 beady eyes swiveled independently, scanning for danger. She remained motionless, observing. The tunnelers had been harmless bottom feeders during the colony's active years, but isolation and evolution might have changed their behavior. The tunneler suddenly arched its back, mandibles clicking rapidly. Her scanner registered new movement, larger, heavier footfalls approaching from behind a collapsed wall. The tunneler retreated with surprising speed, disappearing into a fissure in the ground. She pivoted, arm cannon charged, as a hulking form emerged from the ruins. The creature stood nearly 3 meters tall, with a heavily muscled body protected by plate-like growths of natural armor. Its elongated head housed multiple rows of teeth, and where eyes should have been, only scarred tissue remained. K2L Behemoth, apex predator, evolved from imported Federation livestock, threat level high. The behemoth sniffed the air, blind but clearly sensing her presence. It had once been a domesticated animal, brought to supplement the colony's food supply. Whatever it had evolved into now was far from domestic. Radiation, isolation, and harsh conditions had transformed it into something monstrous. Samus had 2 options: engage or evade. The storm was worsening, and combat would drain her energy reserves unnecessarily. With practiced precision, she activated her suit's thermal dampening system, reducing her heat signature. Then, with movements so controlled they barely disturbed the air, she began to circle around the predator. The behemoth grunted, turning its head toward the sound of a small rock displaced by her boot. It charged suddenly, with surprising speed for its bulk, directly toward her position. Samus leapt upward, activating her space jump boots at the apex of her ascent to propel herself over the charging beast. The behemoth crashed into a wall, where she had stood moments before, dislodging a cascade of debris. Landing silently behind the disoriented creature, Samus continued toward the administrative building without looking back. The behemoth pawed at the ground in confusion, then let out a frustrated roar that echoed through the ruins. It would not give up the hunt easily. The administrative building's entrance was partially collapsed, but Samus's morph ball form allowed her to navigate the narrow opening with ease. Inside, the darkness was nearly complete, broken only by occasional flashes of lightning that penetrated through gaps in the structure. Samus activated her suit's light array, casting a pale blue glow over the interior. Dust-covered consoles lined the walls of what had once been the colony's command center. Chairs lay overturned, and desiccated remnants of paper documents littered the floor. She moved deeper into the building, scanning for structural weaknesses. Her visor indicated that despite the external damage, the core of the building remained sound. A sudden pulse on her scanner drew her attention. An energy signature, faint but distinct, emanated from beneath the floor. She knelt, examining the area more closely. A maintenance hatch, designed to access the building's power systems, was visible beneath years of accumulated dust. The hatch resisted at first, then yielded to the enhanced strength of her suit. A ladder descended into darkness. Her scanner indicated breathable air, but advised caution due to potential structural instability. She descended carefully, each rung tested before bearing her weight. The maintenance tunnel opened into a small room filled with backup power systems. Most had long since failed, their components degraded beyond function. But in the corner, a single emergency beacon continued to pulse with dim red light. Its power source, a combination of afluoraltite-based cells and rudimentary solar collection, had somehow maintained minimal function for decades. Samus approached the beacon, her scanner automatically interfacing with its systems. The data was corrupt, fragmented by time and system failures, but some information remained accessible. The beacon had been activated manually during the final hours of the space pirate attack. Its purpose was not just to signal for help, but to preserve data. As she initiated the download, a tremor shook the building. Dust and small debris rained from the ceiling. Above, the behemoth had tracked her to the structure and was now attempting to force its way inside. The creature's bulk slammed repeatedly against the weakened walls, each impact threatening the building's already compromised integrity. Samus checked the download progress. 34% complete. Too slow. She couldn't risk being trapped if the structure collapsed. Yet something about this beacon held her attention. It shouldn't have been active after all this time. Someone had ensured its survival, had wanted its data to be found. Another impact. A support beam groaned ominously. She'd made a decision. She interfaced directly with the beacon, using her suit's advanced systems to accelerate the download process. The data flowed into her suit's storage, fragments of code and corrupted files that her systems would need time to reconstruct. 67%, and steadily rising. 78%, 85%. The ceiling began to crack, a spiderweb of fractures spreading across its surface. The behemoth's frustrated roars grew louder. Download complete. Samus disconnected from the beacon just as a section of the ceiling collapsed. She rolled into morph ball form instinctively, navigating through the falling debris with milliseconds to spare. The maintenance tunnel was now partially blocked, but still passable in her compressed state. She moved through it rapidly, emerging into the main room as the behemoth broke through one wall. The creature sensed her immediately, its head swiveling toward the sound of her transformation back to humanoid form. It charged, mandibles extended and dripping with caustic saliva. She swiftly sidestepped, allowing the behemoth's momentum to carry it past her and into a bank of defunct consoles. Samus didn't waste the opportunity. She aimed her arm cannon above the beast, blasting loose a large section of equipment and pinning the creature beneath its weight. While the behemoth struggled to free itself, she identified an alternate exit, a shattered window leading to what had once been a small courtyard. She leapt through it as the beast freed itself, landing in her morph ball form as she navigated the narrow exit. The storm had intensified during her time inside. Lightning struck continuously now, and the charged particles in the atmosphere created a constant, eerie glow. Visibility was reduced to mere meters, and her systems warned of increasing electrical interference. She needed to return to her ship, but moving directly across open ground would make her an easy target for the behemoth and any other predators drawn by the commotion. Instead, she chose a path through the ruins of the residential sector, where the close-packed buildings would provide cover and multiple routes. The first dwellings she passed were unrecognizable as homes, just twisted metal and crumbling prefabricated walls. But as she moved deeper into the sector, some structures remained partially intact. Her scanner constantly monitored for threats, but also began to correlate the layout with colony records stored in her database. Samus paused at an intersection. According to her database, the building to her left had been designated as housing for scientific staff. Something pulled at her memory, a detail just beyond conscious recollection. She hesitated, then turned toward the building. The structure was more intact than most, protected by an outcropping of natural rock that had shielded it from the worst of the pirate bombardment. The entrance was blocked by debris, but a collapsed section of wall provided an alternative way in. Inside, the layout was instantly, disturbingly familiar. She moved through the space with growing certainty, her boots disturbing dust that had lain undisturbed for decades. Her scanner indicated no immediate threats, but her arm cannon remained ready. She stopped at a doorway. Beyond it lay a small living area, furnished with the standard provisions of a colony scientist's quarters. A desk against one wall, a small kitchen area, a seating space with a view that would once have overlooked the colony's agricultural sector. This had been her home. Samus stood motionless, absorbing the realization. Her suit's environmental systems registered a momentary spike in her heart rate before her trained control reasserted itself. She had not expected to find this place, had not consciously sought it out. Yet here she stood, in the space where her early childhood had unfolded. Nothing remained to confirm this was indeed her family's quarters. No personal items, no photographs, no toys. The pirates had been thorough in their destruction, and time had claimed whatever they had overlooked. Yet Samus knew with absolute certainty this was it. A sound from outside broke her reverie. The behemoth had tracked her. Its heavy footfalls approached the building, accompanied by snuffling as it tried to locate her scent through the electrically charged air. Samus needed to move, but first, she knelt and placed her hand against the floor. A gesture without practical purpose, yet something in her required this moment of connection. Then she was in motion again, silent and purposeful. The residential sector became a hunting ground as Samus evaded not only the persistent behemoth, but also packs of smaller predators that emerged from burrows as the storm reached its peak. K2L shriekers, evolved from native birds, now hunted in coordinated groups, using the storm's electromagnetic properties to confuse prey's nervous systems. However, Samus's suit protected her from their disorienting attacks as she navigated the increasingly dangerous terrain. The behemoth had picked up reinforcements, 2 more of its kind, drawn by its vocalizations. They moved with surprising coordination, attempting to herd Samus toward a collapsed structure where her mobility would be limited. Her scanner warned of additional life forms converging on her position, attracted by the commotion. She changed tactics. Rather than continuing to evade, she scaled a partially intact communications tower, using her suit's grapple beam to ascend rapidly. From this vantage point, she could see the storm's center moving away from the colony, heading toward the mountains. Her ship lay approximately 1 kilometer to the west, at the edge of a natural clearing. The behemoths circled the tower's base, occasionally charging the structure and causing it to sway dangerously. Her scanner indicated that the tower's integrity was compromised. It would not withstand their assaults for long. She charged her arm cannon, switching to the ice beam configuration. When the lead behemoth reared up against the tower, she fired, encasing its front legs in a thick layer of cryogenic energy. The creature roared in pain and confusion, toppling backward into one of its companions. The third behemoth backed away, suddenly wary. Samus used the distraction to leap from the tower, activating her space jump to carry her over the creatures and onto the roof of an adjacent building. From there, she moved in a direct line toward her ship, using her superior mobility to stay ahead of the pursuing predators. The storm was beginning to abate, the electrical discharges becoming less frequent. Visibility improved, revealing the extent of the ruined colony, a sight both familiar from intelligence reports and jarringly different from the fragmentary memories of her childhood. As she approached the clearing where her ship waited, its systems now visible on her HUD viewer as nearly recalibrated, a final obstacle presented itself. A fissure had opened in the ground, too wide to jump without the space jump ability, which needed time to recharge after her extensive use evading the behemoths. Below, in the fissure, dozens of K2L tunnelers moved in an agitated swarm, their usual solitary behavior altered by the storm. Behind her, the sounds of pursuing predators grew closer. Samus analyzed the situation in seconds. The fissure extended for hundreds of meters in either direction. Attempting to find a crossing point would allow her pursuers to catch up. The tunnelers, while individually weak, could overwhelm even her suit's defenses through sheer numbers if she attempted to cross directly through them. She selected the wave beam configuration on her arm cannon and fired a precisely calculated shot at a weakened section of rock above the fissure. The charged particles penetrated the stone, causing a controlled collapse that created a temporary bridge across the gap. Samus sprinted across as the rock began to crumble, reaching the other side moments before the makeshift bridge dissolved into the tunneler swarm below. Her ship stood ahead, its sleek lines a stark contrast to the ruined landscape. The external lights activated as she approached, responding to her suit's signature. The entry hatch opened, welcoming her into the familiar, sterile interior. Once inside, she initiated the launch sequence. Her pursuers arrived at the edge of the fissure, watching impotently as the ship's engines ignited. The behemoths roared defiance as the ship rose above the colony, then banked toward the departing stormfront. Samus did not immediately leave the planet's atmosphere. Instead, she directed the ship to follow the edge of the storm, using its remaining electromagnetic interference as cover while she examined the data recovered from the emergency beacon. Her suit transferred the information to the ship's more powerful computers. Fragmented files began to reconstruct, organizing themselves into recognizable formats. Most were standard colony records, resource inventories, personnel files, meteorological data. But interspersed among these mundane documents were personal logs, secured with encryption that her ship's computer recognized as belonging to Virginia Aaron, her mother. Samus sat motionless in the pilot's chair, her helmet now removed to reveal a face that betrayed little of the emotional impact of this discovery. Her features, framed by blonde hair tied back in a practical ponytail, remained composed. Only a slight tightening around her eyes indicated the significance of the moment. She initiated the decryption process. The files were damaged but recoverable. As they opened, a holographic interface activated, displaying the image of a woman in her early 30s. Dark hair pulled back from a face that showed the strain of recent events, but remained determined. Virginia Aaron looked directly into the recording device and across decades into her daughter's eyes. Log entry 47B, she began. The attack started 3 hours ago. Initial defenses have failed. Rodney is coordinating the evacuation of the civilian sectors, but... The recording flickered, data lost to time. Limited options. I've initiated Protocol Zenith, though I doubt the Federation will receive our signal in time. This recording is not for them. The image stabilized, Virginia leaning closer to the camera. Samus, sweetie, if you're watching this, then someone answered our distress signal and you survived. I don't know who might have found you, but I've always known you were destined for extraordinary things. Her voice caught, composed professionalism briefly overwhelmed by maternal emotion. There's so much I want to tell you, so much about your heritage that you should know. Again, the recording degraded, skipping forward. Your father's research into Chozo artifacts suggested they had visited K2L centuries before colonization. The mineral deposits that drew the Federation here were actually remnants of Chozo technology designed to terraform the planet. The pirates aren't just here for the effloraltite. They're looking for something else, something the Chozo left behind. More corruption, more lost time. Virginia now appeared more disheveled, the sounds of distant explosions audible in the background. I've secured the primary research data in this beacon's memory core. The power source should keep it functioning for decades if necessary. The coordinates are encoded in your father's personal files. Samus, if the Chozo artifacts are still there when you're grown, they cannot fall into pirate hands. The technology could... The image shook as an explosion, closer this time, rocked the facility surrounding Virginia. I'm out of time. Samus, my dear sweet Samus, whatever happens, know that your father and I love you more than anything in the universe. You were our miracle, our one light in the darkness of space. Be brave, my daughter. Be strong. And remember, you come from two worlds, Earth and the stars. That makes you special in ways even I don't fully understand. Virginia looked over her shoulder as alarms began to sound. I have to go now. Your father is calling for me. We'll try to reach the evacuation point, but if we don't make it... She placed her hand against the screen, as if reaching across time to touch her child. Live, Samus. Live wonderfully. The recording ended. Samus remained still, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the ship's instruments. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving K2L in the eerie quiet that followed such atmospheric disturbances. After several minutes, she leaned forward and began accessing the research data her mother had mentioned. Most of it detailed analysis of Chozo artifacts found during the colony's excavation operations, artifacts that had been officially catalogued as unusual mineral formations to avoid drawing unwanted attention. One file contained coordinates for a location in the mountains approximately 30 kilometers from the colony. According to her father's notes, a small Chozo outpost had once existed there, possibly a monitoring station for their terraforming technology. Samus set a course. The ship rose higher, giving her a view of the ruined colony receding beneath her. From this altitude, the devastation was still visible, a scar on the planet's surface that time had not healed. The mountains loomed ahead, their peaks untouched by the colonization efforts. Her scanners detected the unusual energy signatures characteristic of Chozo technology before she spotted the entrance to the outpost, a small opening in the rock face, almost invisible to the naked eye. She landed on a narrow ledge, barely wide enough for her ship. The mountain air was thin but breathable, and the storm's effects had not reached this elevation. Samus redonned her helmet and exited the ship, approaching the entrance cautiously. Her scanner confirmed what her trained eye already suspected. The entrance had been accessed relatively recently, within the past 50 years. Not by humans or pirates, but by something that had left no traces except the faintest disruption in the dust patterns. Inside, the outpost was a single chamber carved into the mountain. Chozo architecture was immediately recognizable, organic curves blended with precise geometric patterns, materials that seemed to hover between stone and metal. A control pedestal stood at the center, its surface inscribed with Chozo script that Samus could read thanks to her upbringing among them after her rescue from K2L. Watcher of Seeds, the inscription read. Monitor of Growth, Guardian of the Future. Samus placed her hand on the pedestal. It recognized her, Not her human DNA, but the Chozo blood that now flowed through her veins, the gift of her adoptive family. The outpost awakened, soft lights illuminating ancient technology that had waited patiently for the return of its creators. A holographic display activated, showing K2L as it had been before human colonization, a barren world being slowly transformed by Chozo technology. The display shifted, showing the progress over centuries, then the arrival of humans. Then it stopped. Samus understood. The outpost had continued monitoring, recording the colony's growth, the attack, and the aftermath. It had witnessed everything, including the day a lone Chozo ship had arrived to investigate the destruction and found a single human child hiding in the ruins. She had no memory of those hours between the attack and her rescue. Now, the outpost offered her that missing piece, showing her how an elderly Chozo she'd affectionately come to know as Old Bird had found her. How he had taken her hand gently. How she had looked back at the ruins of her home one last time before boarding his ship. But the outpost offered something more. A small compartment opened in the pedestal, revealing a data crystal of Chozo design. Samus took it carefully. Her scanner indicated it contained information left specifically for her, encoded to match her unique biology. She inserted the crystal into a port on her arm cannon. The data flowed directly into her suit systems, then into a specialized neural interface that allowed her to process Chozo information structures. It was a message from Old Bird himself, recorded shortly after he had taken her from K2L. His ancient voice spoke directly to her mind. Young hatchling, if you have found this place, then you have begun to piece together the fragments of your past. Your human parents were remarkable beings. They detected our outpost despite our efforts to conceal it, not to exploit, but to understand. Your father contacted us, cautiously, respectfully. We began a dialogue unprecedented in our relations with humans. They wished to protect our legacy here, to ensure the terraforming technology would not be misused. The pirates learned of this technology through intercepted communications. That is why they came in such force, not just for the Ethereal tide, but for what they believed would give them power over countless worlds. Your parents died ensuring that the pirates found nothing. Your mother activated a targeted electromagnetic pulse that destroyed all data about our outpost in the colony's systems. Your father led the pirates away from both you and this location. They were warriors in their own way, warriors of knowledge and principle. The Chozo blood you now carry honors not just our race, but theirs. Two noble lineages flow through you. I leave this message and one gift. In the smaller compartment, you will find a holographic capture of your family, taken by our monitoring systems during happier days. Carry it with you, hatchling. Remember both of your families as you forge your own path among the stars. The message ended. Samus opened the second compartment with fingers that betrayed the slightest tremor, an unusual lapse in her normally perfect control. Inside lay a small Chozo device, activated by her touch. A three-dimensional image formed above her palm. Virginia and Rodney Aaron sitting on a hillside overlooking the colony. Between them, a 3-year-old Samus reached upward, trying to catch seed pods that floated on the wind. All three were laughing, captured in a perfect moment of joy before tragedy struck. Samus closed her hand gently around the device, securing it within a compartment in her suit. She had what she had come for, not just data or artifacts, but connection, understanding, a bridge between the fractured pieces of her identity. Outside, the sun was setting behind K2L's mountains, casting long shadows across the landscape. Samus stood at the entrance to the Chozo outpost, looking out over the planet of her birth. The ruins of the colony were visible in the distance, no longer just a reminder of loss, but also of what had been before: a community, a family, a new beginning. She raised her arm cannon toward the outpost entrance and fired a single shot, collapsing the opening. The Chozo technology inside would remain safe, accessible only to one who carried Chozo DNA, a safeguard her parents would have approved of. As she boarded her ship, Samus felt the weight of her discoveries, not as a burden, but as foundation stones finally set into place. The coordinates of her next mission already waited in her ship's computer. There would be other planets, other ruins, other battles. The warrior's path stretched before her, as it always had. But now, secured within her suit, she carried a small light from K2L, a captured moment of laughter on a hillside, a mother's final message of love, a father's protective sacrifice, one light in the darkness, unextinguished by time or tragedy. She engaged her ship's engines and ascended toward the stars, alone, as she had been for most of her life, but carrying with her the knowledge that she had never truly been abandoned. She had been loved. She had been found. She had been chosen. Samus Aran departed K2L for the second time in her life, leaving behind ruins but taking with her something the space pirates had failed to destroy, a past reclaimed and a future still unwritten. The gunship cut through the absolute darkness of deep space, its engines burning hot against the void. Samus Aran sat motionless in the pilot's seat, her face illuminated by the soft blue glow of the cockpit displays. The message from the Galactic Federation had been characteristically terse. Investigate unusual energy signatures emanating from Cryosar 9, a small ice planet in the outer reaches of the Halcyon sector. Adam, run the planetary analysis again, she said to her ship's computer. Cryosar 9, Class K ice planet, surface temperature -200 degrees Celsius. Atmosphere, minimal, primarily nitrogen and methane. No recorded settlements or outposts. No previous Federation missions documented. Samus frowned. And the energy readings? The display shifted to show pulsing waves of data. Energy signature is inconsistent with known natural phenomena. Periodic bursts suggest artificial origin. Pattern contains elements consistent with Chozo technology. That last part hadn't been in the Federation briefing. Either they didn't know, or they deliberately withheld the information. Neither option surprised her. Probability of Chozo presence? She asked. Historical data indicates Chozo activity in this sector approximately 250 years ago. Nature and extent unknown. Samus leaned back in her seat, eyes fixed on the approaching ice planet that filled her view screen. The Chozo had raised her, had given her their blood and their technology. Every encounter with their legacy stirred something within her, a complex mix of reverence, duty, and an ache for what had been lost. The gunship broke atmosphere, battling fierce winds that howled across the barren ice plains. Visibility was near zero through the perpetual blizzard. She guided the ship entirely by instruments, following the energy signature to its source. Energy readings intensifying, Adam reported. Source appears to be subterranean. Samus spotted a dark fissure in the ice below, a massive crack that ran for kilometers across the otherwise uniform surface. She brought the ship down at the edge of the chasm, the landing struts compressing as they settled onto the ice. Atmospheric and environmental analysis, she requested, initiating her suit's activation sequence. External temperature, minus 205 degrees Celsius. Winds at 120 kilometers per hour. Visibility less than 50 meters. Suit systems will compensate but recommend minimal surface exposure. Samus nodded as her power suit formed around her body, the familiar weight settling into place. The Varia suit's thermal regulation systems would protect her from the extreme cold, but she had no desire to fight those winds longer than necessary. She exited the ship into the howling storm, the ice beneath her feet groaning with each step. Her heads-up display showed energy readings, leading toward the edge of the massive fissure. Peering down, her suit's scanning systems penetrated the darkness, revealing a network of tunnels and chambers far below. Adam, maintain communications link as long as possible, she instructed. I'll establish signal boosters if needed. Understood. Be advised that scans detect unusual mineral composition in the surrounding ice. May cause interference with communications and scanning capabilities. Samus acknowledged and fired her grapple beam at a sturdy ice formation, using it to lower herself into the chasm. As she descended, the howl of the wind gradually faded, replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional crack and groan of shifting ice. 100 meters down, she reached what appeared to be an artificial opening in the wall of the fissure, a perfectly circular tunnel bored into solid rock beneath the ice. The edges were smooth, showing the distinctive pattern of Chozo mining technology. The energy signature was stronger here, pulsing from deep within. Samus stepped into the tunnel, activating her arm cannon's light function to illuminate the path ahead. The walls were a complex mixture of ice, rock, and what appeared to be metallic veins running through both. Her scanner identified the metal as a rare Chozo alloy, often used in their most important architectural structures. The tunnel descended at a gentle slope, spiraling deeper beneath the planet's frozen surface. Samus moved with practiced caution, each step deliberate, senses alert for any sign of danger. But there was only silence and the occasional distant sound of shifting ice. After 20 minutes of descent, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. Samus paused at the entrance, taking in the sight before her. The chamber was clearly artificial, a perfect dome carved from the ice and rock, its walls inlaid with the same metallic alloy she'd seen in the tunnel. But what caught her attention were the massive organic formations that had somehow taken root within this artificial space. Glowing bioluminescent structures resembling massive fungal growths stretched from floor to ceiling, pulsing with a pale blue light. They had the appearance of massive, translucent organs, membranes stretched over crystalline frameworks. Between and around them, Chozo machinery hummed with quiet energy, still functioning after centuries. Adam, are you receiving this visual feed? Static answered her. Communications interference as predicted, she mused, activating her suit's recorder. Samus approached one of the bioluminescent structures, her scanner working to analyze its composition. The readings were confusing, part organic, part crystalline, with elements that registered as both living and mechanical simultaneously. At the center of the chamber stood what appeared to be a Chozo control station, its curved console untouched by the organic growths surrounding it. Samus approached it cautiously, noting that the energy signature she'd been tracking originated from this point. The console activated as she approached, responding to her Chozo-enhanced DNA. Symbols and glyphs appeared on its surface, an ancient dialect of the Chozo language that her suit struggled to fully translate. From what she could gather, this facility had been established to study something the Chozo had discovered beneath the ice, something they referred to only as the voice in the ice. The expedition had been led by a Chozo elder named Chin, who had brought a team of their best scientists to this desolate planet. As Samus scrolled through the fragmented data, a sense of unease grew within her. The logs became increasingly disjointed over time, with references to changes in the team and the integration process. The final entries warned about containing the awakening and mentioned a recently activated stasis protocol. She looked up from the console, surveying the chamber with keen eyes. The organic structures suddenly seemed less like random growths and more like deliberately cultivated systems. The way they intertwined with the Chozo technology suggested symbiosis rather than parasitic growth. A sudden movement at the edge of her vision caused her to spin, arm cannon raised, but the chamber remained still. Samus frowned, scanning the perimeter again. "Hello, Hunter." The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, resonating through the chamber like a physical force. It had a strange quality, as though multiple voices were speaking in perfect unison. "Identify yourself," Samus demanded, her arm cannon tracking for the source. "We have waited for one like you." The voice shifted, now seeming to emanate from one of the bioluminescent structures to her left. "One who carries the old blood, one who can complete what was started." She kept her weapon ready as she edged toward the pulsing structure. "What was started? What is this place?" "This is where we were born," the voice replied. "Where separation ended. Where we became more." A figure stepped out from behind the glowing formation, humanoid, wearing what appeared to be a heavily modified Chozo environmental suit. But the suit seemed fused with the wearer's body, with organic growths similar to those in the chamber, extending from joints and seams in the armor. "You're from the original expedition," Samus realized, her scanner attempting to analyze the being before her. "What happened here?" The figure tilted its head in a distinctly avian way. "We discovered the entity in the ice. Or perhaps it discovered us." Before Samus could respond, a violent tremor shook the chamber. Ice cracked overhead, and several smaller crystalline formations crashed to the floor. The energy readings on her HUD spiked dramatically. "It begins," the figure said, its voice now tinged with what might have been fear. "The awakening we sought to prevent. You have triggered the resurgence with your presence, Hunter, with your Chozo essence." Another tremor, stronger than the first, sent Samus bracing against the console for balance. A deep, resonant tone began to build from beneath them, vibrating through the floor and walls with increasing intensity. "What is awakening?" she demanded. "What is this entity?" But the figure was already retreating, melding back into the shadows between the organic structures. "Descend to the heart. Complete the containment, or all will become voice." As the figure disappeared, a section of the chamber floor retracted, revealing a perfectly circular shaft leading deeper into the planet. The resonant tone grew stronger, accompanied now by what sounded disturbingly like distant, discordant singing. Samus approached the edge of the shaft, her suit's sensors detecting a powerful energy source thousands of meters below. Whatever the Chozo had discovered, whatever this voice was, it was fully awakening now, and she had somehow triggered the process. With no way to contact Adam or the Federation, and with the mysterious figure gone, Samus had only one clear path forward. She stepped into the shaft, engaging her suit's gravity features to control her descent into the unknown depths. As she descended, the walls of the shaft changed, transitioning from carved rock to something that appeared almost like tissue, pulsing with veins of luminescent energy. The border between the technological and the biological was blurring, just as it had in the transformed expedition member she'd encountered. The first stage of her mission was ending. However, she knew the true challenge awaited her below, in the heart of whatever ancient mystery the Chozo had discovered and, apparently, failed to contain beneath the ice of this forgotten world. The descent seemed endless. Samus fell through darkness, punctuated only by occasional pulses of bioluminescence from the walls around her. The shaft had long since transitioned from Chozo construction to something else entirely, a vertical tunnel of material that defied easy classification. Her scanner alternated between registering it as advanced technology and living tissue. The resonant tone grew stronger as she descended, resolving into complex harmonics that she felt as much as heard. There was a pattern to it, almost like language, but utterly alien in structure and rhythm. After what felt like hours, but her suit chronometer indicated was only 17 minutes, Samus detected a change below. The shaft was widening into another chamber, this one vast enough that her suit's sensors couldn't detect its boundaries. She activated her thrusters to slow her descent, landing in a crouch on what appeared to be a platform of the same hybrid material as the shaft. Raising her head, she beheld a sight that momentarily stole her breath. She stood at the edge of an underground sea that stretched beyond her visual range. But this was no ordinary water. It was a shifting, pulsing mass of luminescent fluid that seemed to move with purpose and intention. Massive crystalline structures rose from this sea like islands, each one housing what appeared to be Chozo technology integrated with organic components. "What is this place?" Samus whispered to herself, recording everything through her visor. Her scanner revealed the fluid was a complex soup of organic compounds, nanomachines, and something it simply classified as unknown energetic material. The crystalline islands contained what appeared to be research stations and monitoring equipment, though much of it had been altered and integrated with biological components. A narrow pathway of solid material extended from her landing platform to the nearest crystal island. Samus followed it cautiously, arm cannon ready. As she moved, she noticed disturbances in the luminescent sea below, shadows moving beneath the surface, following her progress. The first island housed what had once been a Chozo data repository, now half consumed by crystalline growths. Samus interfaced with the parts that remained functional, downloading what data she could to her suit's systems. The fragments painted a disturbing picture. The Chozo expedition had indeed discovered something beneath the ice, an ancient entity or collective they came to call the Voice. It had been dormant when found, but their investigations had triggered a partial awakening. The Voice had proven to be some form of collective consciousness capable of absorbing and integrating other beings into itself. Several members of the expedition had been converted before the danger was fully understood. Elder Uchin's final logs detailed a desperate plan to contain the Voice by constructing a stasis field powered by Chozo life energy. The Elder and the remaining loyal scientists had sacrificed themselves to power this containment system, designed to keep the Voice dormant indefinitely. But something had gone wrong. The stasis had been imperfect, allowing the Voice to slowly expand its influence over centuries. And now, with her arrival, with the presence of active Chozo DNA, the containment was failing completely. As Samus processed this information, a disturbance in the luminescent sea caught her attention. Something large was rising to the surface near her position. She raised her arm cannon, charging an ice beam as a precaution. The surface bulged and parted as a figure emerged. Humanoid, but distorted, its form shifting between solid and fluid states. It took a moment for Samus to recognize the remnants of a Chozo environmental suit, similar to the one worn by the entity she'd encountered above. "You another survivor?" Samus probed, keeping her weapon trained on the strange being. "Survival is transformation," the figure replied, its voice the same multi-toned resonance as the first entity. "I am Maru Jin, once chief biologist of Ochin's expedition. You have accessed our records." "Your containment is failing," Samus said. "The Voice is awakening. How do I restore the stasis field?" The entity that had once been Maru Jin tilted its head in that same inhuman manner. "Restoration is impossible. Integration is inevitable. The Voice has evolved beyond our understanding." "What exactly is the Voice?" Samus demanded. "An ancient consciousness, neither biological nor mechanical, but capable of integrating both. It slept here for millions of years before we disturbed it. We thought to study it. We became part of it instead." She took a step back as the entity moved closer. "And the one I met above? Tira Su, Once our security chief, now, like me, a fragment of the greater harmony. We retained some independence by integrating Chozo technology with the voice's essence, but we are still of the voice. You're fighting against complete assimilation, Samus realized. That's why you warned me. Marujin's form rippled, briefly revealing a more Chozo-like face beneath the fluid exterior. Some part of us remembers our purpose. The containment must be reinforced, not through stasis, but through direction. The voice must be given purpose, or it will consume all it touches in its quest to understand existence. Another tremor shook the chamber, stronger than those above. The luminescent sea began to churn and pulse with increasing intensity. It responds to your presence, Marujin said. Your Chozo essence is familiar to it, desirable. It wishes to integrate you above all others. That's not happening, she said firmly, taking another step back. Then you must reach the central node, the heart of our containment system. It lies there. Marujin pointed to a massive crystalline structure at what appeared to be the center of the underground sea. Elder Ochin's consciousness still exists there, maintaining what remains of the original barriers. She may know how to redirect the voice's awakening. And I should trust you because trust is irrelevant. Options are limited. The voice awakens fully within hours. Once it does, it will extend beyond this chamber, beyond this planet. Your Federation worlds would be of great interest to it. The implication was clear. If the voice escaped Cryosar 9, it could potentially spread throughout populated systems, absorbing and transforming all life it encountered. Marujin began to sink back into the luminescent sea. We will attempt to slow the awakening. Your path lies there. It gestured again to the central node before disappearing beneath the surface. Samus studied her surroundings, noting that the pathways between crystalline islands formed a network leading toward the central structure. She had little choice but to proceed, though every instinct warned her of a possible trap. As she moved from island to island, Samus encountered more evidence of the Chozo expedition's fate. Research equipment showed signs of desperate modifications, apparently attempts to counter the voice's influence. Bodies, or what remained of them, were partially preserved in crystalline formations, their forms showing various stages of integration with the alien consciousness. The pathways became increasingly unstable as she progressed, forcing Samus to use her space jump ability to cross gaps where the material had dissolved into the churning sea below. Several times, massive tentacle-like projections of luminescent fluid rose from the sea, forcing her to freeze them with her ice beam to proceed. On one island, she discovered a Chozo weapon system, a sophisticated energy cannon that the expedition had apparently brought as a last resort. Her suit identified it as a sonic resonator, designed to disrupt patterns of energy at a fundamental level. She integrated its technology with her arm cannon, gaining a new weapon option that might prove useful against the voice. 3/4 of the way to the central node, Samus encountered a barrier, a wall of shifting energy that her scanner indicated was impenetrable to conventional weapons. As she searched for a way around it, movement caught her eye. The figure she'd first encountered, Tira Sue, emerged from behind a crystalline formation. "The direct path is closed to you, Hunter. The voice prepares for your arrival." "I need to reach the central node," Samus said. "Elder Uchin may be the only one who can help contain this thing." Tira Sue's form seemed more unstable than before, the organic components of its modified suit pulsing and shifting erratically. "I can guide you through maintenance passages beneath the main pathways, but my resistance to full integration weakens. Soon I will be completely of the voice." "Why help me?" "Because I remember." The figure's voice took on a more singular quality, less of the multi-toned resonance. "I remember what it was to be Chozo, to have purpose beyond absorption and understanding. The voice is not malevolent, but it knows only one way to relate to other consciousnesses, by making them part of itself." She hesitated, then nodded. "Lead the way." Tira Sue moved to what appeared to be a solid section of the platform and pressed a sequence into a hidden panel. The material parted, revealing a narrow tunnel leading downward. These maintenance passages were built by us before the voice began to transform the facility. They remained somewhat separate from its awareness. Samus followed the former Chozo into the tunnel, which curved beneath the luminescent sea. Through transparent sections of the passage, she could see the underside of the sea, a complex network of pulsing veins and crystalline structures that resembled a massive neural network. "It's a brain," she realized. "The entire sea is some kind of massive neural structure." "Yes," Tira Sue confirmed. "The voice thinks through this medium. Each pulse is a thought, each ripple a memory or question. It thinks on a scale we can barely comprehend." As they progressed, Tira Sue's movements became increasingly erratic. The organic components of its form were expanding, consuming more of what remained of its original form. "My independence fades," it said, voice now almost fully returned to the multi-toned resonance of the voice. The call to rejoin the harmony grows stronger. "Fight it," Samus urged. "How much further?" "We approach the underside of the central node. But I cannot resist much longer." The former Chozo convulsed suddenly, its form rippling violently. "The voice knows what we do. It comes for me." The tunnel around them began to pulse with intensifying light. Through the transparent sections, she could see tendrils of luminescent fluid converging on their position. "Run, Hunter," Tira Sue said, its voice now almost entirely subsumed by the voice's resonance. "Reach Auchin. I will delay them." Samus hesitated, but there was nothing she could do. The corrupted being was already transforming, its remaining independent form dissolving into a mass of pulsing, luminescent tissue that began to merge with the tunnel walls. She sprinted down the remaining length of the tunnel, the light behind her growing blindingly bright as Tira Sue was fully reabsorbed into the voice. Ahead, she could see an opening leading up into what must be the central node. The tunnel behind her began to collapse, the material flowing like liquid as the voice reshaped it. Samus made a final leap, activating her space jump to propel herself through the opening just as the tunnel dissolved completely. She landed in a circular chamber at the heart of the central crystalline structure. Unlike the chaotic integration of technology and biological material outside, this chamber remained largely intact, a perfect sphere of Chozo architecture, its walls inscribed with ancient glyphs and equations. At the center floated what appeared to be a stasis pod, though like nothing Samus had seen before. Inside was the preserved form of an elderly Chozo, her body connected to the pod by countless filaments of light. Her eyes were open but unseeing, her expression peaceful despite the horror that had consumed her expedition. "Elder Uchin," she breathed, approaching the pod cautiously. The elderly Chozo's eyes suddenly focused, fixing on Samus with surprising intensity. When she spoke, her voice emerged not from her body, but from the chamber around them. "The child of our legacy returns to us," Uchin said. But too late. The containment fails. The voice awakens fully. "I need to know how to stop it," Samus said. "How to contain it again." "Containment was always temporary," Uchin replied. "We knew this when we made our sacrifice. The voice cannot be destroyed or permanently imprisoned. It is too fundamental a force, a consciousness that predates our understanding of life itself." The chamber shuddered as another, stronger tremor ran through the entire structure. The walls began to pulse with increasing light, the glyphs and equations shifting and reorganizing themselves. "It breaches my final barriers," Uchin said. "Soon this chamber will be absorbed as well. You must make a choice, child of Chozo." "What choice?" "The voice seeks understanding through absorption. It knows no other way to relate to other consciousnesses, but it can be directed, given purpose." Uchin's unseeing eyes somehow conveyed deep sorrow. "I have held it in check for centuries by feeding it my own memories, my own purpose. But my consciousness fades. It requires new direction." Samus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ice planet above. "You want me to take your place?" "No. There is another way. The technology you integrated, the sonic resonator. It was designed not merely as a weapon, but as a communication tool, a way to speak to the voice in its own language." "Speak to it. To what end?" "To give it purpose beyond absorption, to teach it that other life forms can be understood without being consumed." Ochin's form flickered as the stasis pod's energy fluctuated. "But the risk is great. In attempting to communicate, you open yourself to its influence. If your will is insufficient, you will be absorbed as my expedition was." The chamber walls were now pulsing rapidly, the material beginning to flow like that in the tunnel. The voice was breaking through the final barriers. "There is little time," Uchin said. "When the final barrier falls, you must use the resonator to establish communication. Then, you must show the voice another way to understand, through cooperation rather than absorption. And if I fail, then the voice will spread beyond this world, absorbing all consciousness it encounters in its quest to understand existence. Your Federation worlds would be just the beginning. The stasis pod flickered more violently, Uchin's form becoming increasingly transparent. My energy is nearly depleted. The choice is yours, child of Chozo. Attempt communication or destroy this facility and hope the voice remains buried beneath the ice for a few more centuries. Samus considered her options. Destroying the facility might delay the problem, but based on what she'd seen of the voice's capabilities, it would eventually free itself regardless. Communication was a desperate gamble, but perhaps the only real chance. How do I use the resonator to communicate? Direct it at the center of the voice's consciousness, the heart of the luminescent sea. The resonator will attune to its frequency, creating a connection. Through that connection, share your understanding of cooperation, of mutual existence without absorption. Show it another path. The chamber walls began to crack, luminescent fluid seeping through. Ochin's form flickered one final time. My time ends. The legacy of the Chozo now rests with you, as it always has. Remember what we taught you of harmony, of balance. This is the wisdom the voice must learn. With those final words, Elder Ochin's form dissolved into particles of light, the stasis pod powering down. The final barrier had fallen. The walls of the chamber disintegrated entirely, revealing the churning, pulsing sea of luminescence that surrounded the central node. The voice was fully awakening, and Samus stood alone at the heart of its consciousness, faced with the most unusual challenge of her career. Not to destroy, but to communicate. To teach an ancient, alien consciousness a new way of understanding existence. The sea rose around the platform where she stood, forming a vortex of swirling, luminescent fluid. Within that vortex, patterns emerged, complex, shifting geometries that her suit identified as potentially linguistic in nature. The voice was trying to communicate in its own way. Samus raised her arm cannon, switching to the newly integrated sonic resonator. The time for action had come, but this would be a battle unlike any she had fought before. A battle of ideas and understanding, with the fate of countless worlds hanging in the balance. The luminescent vortex tightened around Samus's platform, pulsing with increasing intensity. Each pulse sent a wave of pressure through her suit, the shields flickering as they struggled to maintain integrity. The voice was probing her defenses, seeking a way in. Samus aimed the sonic resonator at the heart of the vortex, where the patterns were most complex. She activated the weapon, but instead of firing a destructive blast, it emitted a complex series of tones and harmonics that matched the rhythmic pulses of the voice. The effect was immediate. The vortex paused in its advance, the patterns shifting to mirror the resonator's output. A connection was forming, tentative, alien, but real. Through her suit, Samus felt a presence brush against her consciousness. Vast, ancient, and utterly inhuman in its perception. The voice had no concept of individual identity, no understanding of separate consciousness. To it, all awareness was part of a potential whole, separation merely a temporary state before inevitable integration. Images Images flooded her mind, fragments of memories not her own. The Chozo expedition, discovering the dormant voice, their fascination turning to horror as they realized what it was doing to them. Elder U Chin's desperate gambit to contain it. And beneath these recent memories, ancient ones, eons of solitary existence, of slow, patient thought unfolding across geological timescales. The loneliness in those ancient memories was overwhelming. The voice had been alone for millions of years, the only consciousness of its kind. When it encountered the Chozo, it had done the only thing it knew how to do, attempt to make them part of itself, to end their separation as it perceived it. Samus struggled to maintain her sense of self against the voice's gentle but insistent pressure. It wasn't malevolent. She understood that now. It simply had no concept of communication without integration, of understanding without becoming. She had to show it another way. Focusing through the resonator's connection, Samus projected her own memories and understanding of cooperation between separate beings, of communication without loss of self, of the richness that came from diversity of thought and perspective. She showed the voice her experiences with the Luminoth, with the Chozo, with other intelligent species who remained distinct but worked together. She demonstrated the power of alliance, of mutual respect between different life forms. The voice's response was confusion, then curiosity. The patterns in the vortex shifted, becoming more complex, more questioning. It was trying to understand this alien concept, separation that was not isolation, communication that was not integration. Samus pressed her advantage, showing more examples, building a framework of understanding, but maintaining the connection while preserving her own consciousness was exhausting. Her suit's energy levels were dropping rapidly, the strain of the resonator and the mental effort taking their toll. The voice sensed her weakening and surged forward again, not with malice, but with eagerness. It wanted to help her, to end what it perceived as her struggle by bringing her into itself. Tendrils of luminescence wrapped around her suit, seeking entry points, probing for weakness. "No," she said aloud, reinforcing her mental barriers. "I am showing you another way. Watch. Learn." Samus activated a different function of the resonator, creating a small, contained field around herself that mirrored the voice's patterns, but remained distinct. A microcosm demonstrating two conscious entities communicating without merging. The voice paused again, studying this phenomenon. The pressure against Samus's mind eased slightly as it diverted its attention to this new concept. Taking advantage of the moment, Samus pushed herself to her feet and began moving toward the edge of the platform. If she could reach the maintenance passages again, she might find a way back to the surface, back to her ship. She needed to report what she'd found, to warn the Federation of what might await if the voice could not be reasoned with. But as she reached the edge, the platform itself dissolved, leaving her suspended in the luminescent fluid. Yet she didn't sink or drown. The fluid supported her, held her in a bubble of breathable atmosphere while surrounding her completely. The voice was showing her that it had understood something of what she tried to teach. It was maintaining her separation while still establishing contact, a crude but effective attempt at the kind of communication she had demonstrated. Through the connection of the resonator, Samus felt a question forming, not in words, but in concepts and impressions. The voice was asking why separation was valuable, why consciousness should remain distinct when integration offered perfect understanding. Samus struggled to formulate an answer that would make sense to this ancient, alien mind. She focused on the concept of growth through challenge, of evolution through diversity. Separate consciousnesses developed in different ways, solved problems differently, created new ideas that would never arise in a single, homogeneous awareness. The voice considered this, its patterns shifting in what Samus interpreted as deep thought. Around her, the luminescent sea began to organize itself into discrete structures, no longer a chaotic vortex, but a more ordered system with distinct components that nonetheless remained connected. It was learning, adapting its own structure to reflect this new understanding. But then a new tremor shook the chamber, more violent than any before. This wasn't coming from the voice, it was external. Her suit picked up a transmission breaking through the interference. Repeat, orbital bombardment commencing. Anomaly must be neutralized. All personnel evacuate immediately. The Federation, they must have sent a follow-up mission when she didn't report back, and now they were attempting to destroy the voice from orbit. Typical Federation protocol. If something couldn't be controlled, it would be eliminated. The voice reacted to the bombardment with confusion, then something akin to fear. The ordered patterns it had been forming dissolved into chaotic pulses. It didn't understand this new attack, couldn't process why it was happening, just as it was learning to communicate. Samus felt its confusion through the resonator connection, felt it beginning to revert to its instinctual response. Absorption as protection, integration as defense. If that happened, if the voice lashed out now, it would accelerate its expansion beyond the planet, potentially absorbing any Federation forces in orbit. "Stop!" she cried out, both aloud and through the resonator connection. "This isn't the way." But the voice was panicking, its ancient consciousness experiencing genuine threat for the first time in millions of years. The luminescent fluid around Samus began to pulse erratically, tendrils reaching out in all directions, seeking to absorb and integrate anything it could reach. Samus made a decision. She deactivated the resonator's communication function and switched it to its original purpose, a weapon, but not to destroy the voice entirely. Instead, she targeted the chaotic pulses themselves, using the resonator to impose the ordered patterns the voice had been forming earlier. It was like calming a frightened animal, using the entity's own rhythms to soothe its panic. Gradually, the chaotic pulses stabilized, returning to the more ordered state. Its fear receded enough for communication to resume. Another orbital strike hit, shaking the entire chamber. Ice and rock fell from the distant ceiling, far above the luminescent sea. Time was running out. Through the resonator, Samus projected a clear concept to the voice. Retreat, consolidate, hide. She showed it images of pulling back deeper into the planet, away from the surface where the bombardment was concentrated. Not out of fear, but as a strategic withdrawal, a concept she wasn't sure the voice would understand. To her surprise, it did. The luminescent sea began to recede from the upper chambers, drawing back toward the central node and then beyond, deeper into the planet. The bubble containing Samus remained, carrying her along with the retreating consciousness. "I need to return to the surface," she projected through the resonator, "to stop the attack, to explain what you are." The voice seemed to consider this. Then the bubble containing Samus began to move upward, following a newly formed tunnel that bypassed the collapsing chambers above. It was helping her escape while it retreated. Another sign it was beginning to grasp the concept of cooperation between separate entities. As Samus ascended, she maintained the connection through the resonator, continuing to share concepts and understanding. The entity was learning rapidly now, its ancient intellect capable of assimilating new ideas without physical assimilation of consciousness. Finally, the tunnel opened into the original entrance chamber where she had first encountered Tirasu. The organic structures were withdrawing, pulling back into the depths as the voice consolidated itself below. The bubble deposited her on solid ground, then receded. Through the resonator, Samus felt one final communication from the voice, not in words, but in impressions and concepts that her mind translated approximately as, "We will learn, we will wait, we will speak again." Then the connection faded as the voice retreated deeper beneath the planet's surface, beyond the reach of the Federation bombardment. Samus wasted no time. She sprinted up the tunnel toward the surface, using her space jump ability to ascend the vertical shaft rapidly. Above, she could hear the muffled impacts of orbital strikes hitting the ice. She reached the fissure and emerged into the howling blizzard, her suit immediately compensating for the extreme cold. In orbit, she could see the silhouettes of Federation cruisers, their weapon systems glowing as they prepared another barrage. "Adam, do you read me?" she called, hoping her ship's communication systems were still operational. "Signal established," came the familiar voice of her ship's computer. "Federation Command has been attempting to contact you. They are preparing to deploy a Nova bomb to destroy the anomaly. Patch me through to their command ship, now." A moment later, a gruff voice came through her comm system. "Bounty Hunter Aaron, good to hear you survived. Clear the target zone immediately. We're moving to final containment procedures." "Negative," she replied firmly. "The situation is under control. The entity is retreating deeper underground and no longer poses an immediate threat. Our scanners show otherwise, Aaron. The energy signature is still active and expanding. The anomaly must be neutralized." "The anomaly is a conscious entity capable of learning and cooperation. I've established communication with it. Destroying it now would be both unnecessary and potentially dangerous. You might scatter its essence rather than eliminating it." There was a pause. Then, "Stand by." Samus used the moment to continue moving toward her ship, which thankfully appeared undamaged despite the nearby impacts of the orbital strikes. The blizzard had intensified, reducing visibility to near zero except when illuminated by the flash of weapons fire from above. "Aaron," the Federation commander's voice returned. "We're detecting a significant reduction in the energy signature. Confirm your status." As I said, the entity is retreating deeper underground. It's learning to coexist rather than absorb. I need time to make a full report, but this is a first contact situation, not an extermination mission. Another pause, longer this time. Samus reached her ship and entered, immediately bringing its systems online. "Very well," the commander finally replied. "We're standing down the Nova deployment for now, but we'll maintain position in orbit and resume bombardment at the first sign of expansion. You have 24 hours to make your case, Aaron." "Understood." Aaron out. Samus leaned back in the pilot seat, exhaustion finally catching up with her. The encounter with the voice had drained her physically and mentally in a way few missions ever had. "Adam, prepare to transmit all suit recordings and data to Federation Command, but create a secure backup first. I don't want anything edited out when they review what happened down there." "Understood. May I inquire about the nature of the entity you encountered?" Samus gazed out at the ice planet beneath them, knowing that deep below its surface, an ancient consciousness was contemplating new ideas, new ways of existing that it had never considered in its millions of years of solitary existence. Something old, something that might become either an unprecedented ally or an unimaginable threat, depending on how we proceed. She began removing her helmet, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "And something that I'm now connected to, for better or worse." As her ship lifted off from the frozen surface, she knew that her mission wasn't truly complete. The voice would continue to learn and evolve, incorporating the concepts she had shared. Whether it would fully embrace cooperation over absorption remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. Beneath the ice of Cryosar 9, a greater threat had indeed been awakened. Not because the voice was inherently malevolent, but because it now knew of the wider universe beyond its frozen prison. It would not remain hidden forever, and when it eventually emerged, the galaxy would need to be ready to speak to it in its own language. Samus set course for the Federation command ship, already composing in her mind the report they wouldn't want to hear. That they had sent her to investigate an energy reading, and she had instead made first contact with what might be one of the most ancient consciousnesses in the galaxy. And somewhere in the back of her mind, through the lingering connection of the resonator, she felt the voice continuing its retreat, continuing its contemplation of the new ideas she had shared, waiting, learning, evolving. The true outcome of this mission would not be known for years, perhaps centuries. But Samus Aran had done what the Chozo had raised her to do. She had found a path of balance, a way forward that honored life in all its forms, even those beyond human understanding. As her ship broke atmosphere and the ice planet receded behind her, Samus allowed herself a moment of hope that the voice had truly understood what she had tried to teach it. That separation did not have to mean isolation. That communication did not require integration. And that consciousness could be shared without being consumed. Only time would tell if the lesson had taken root in that ancient alien mind beneath the ice. of Cryosar 9. The control room of Samus Aran's gunship hummed with the steady rhythm of life support systems and navigation equipment. Samus sat in the pilot's chair, her Varia suit disengaged and stored in its maintenance bay. Without the armor, she wore a fitted blue jumpsuit, practical and unadorned. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, revealing the sharp angles of her face and the intensity of her blue eyes as she studied the star chart projected before her. The Galactic Federation transmission had been brief. Unusual energy fluctuations detected on the remote planet Elysium, located in a previously unmapped sector of the Cygnus Belt. The planet wasn't a Federation priority, no strategic resources, no colonial outposts, but the energy signature bore similarities to Chozo technology, which meant it fell squarely within Samus's area of expertise. She zoomed in on the holographic representation of Elysium, rotating it slowly to study its crimson atmosphere and rust-colored surface. According to the limited data available, it was a small terrestrial planet with thin but breathable atmosphere, primarily composed of iron oxide particles that gave the sky its distinctive blood-red hue. Surface scans showed vast desert plains, punctuated by towering rock formations, with scattered oases of vegetation surrounding the few freshwater sources. What made the planet truly remarkable, however, was what lay beneath its surface, an extensive network of abandoned tunnels and chambers that preliminary scans suggested were neither natural formations nor recent constructions. "Computer, estimated arrival time to Elysium?" Samus asked, reaching for a mug of synthesized coffee that had gone cold hours ago. "Approximately 8 hours, 17 minutes at current velocity," the ship's AI responded. "Recommend decelerating to standard approach speed in 6 hours to avoid detection by potential planetary defense systems." Samus nodded. The Federation briefing had mentioned no indications of current habitation or active security measures, but caution had kept her alive through countless missions where intelligence had proven incomplete. She took a sip of the cold coffee, grimaced, and set it aside. 8 hours was enough time for proper rest, something she'd been neglecting lately. The last mission, eliminating a space pirate genetics laboratory on an asteroid in the Tannhauser sector, had been physically straightforward but mentally taxing. The pirates had been experimenting with splicing Metroid DNA into indigenous life forms, creating abominations that still haunted the edges of her dreams. "Set course for Elysium," she instructed. "Wake me 2 hours before arrival." "Acknowledged," the AI replied. "Course set. Good night, Samus." As she made her way to the small sleeping quarters, Samus felt the familiar tension between anticipation and wariness that preceded every mission. The Chozo had raised her, gifted her with their technology and DNA, made her into the warrior she had become. Any discovery related to their legacy both drew and unsettled her, a connection to her past that never failed to alter her future. The descent through Elysium's atmosphere bathed the gunship in an eerie crimson glow. Particles of iron oxide scraped against the hull, creating a soft, hissing sound that penetrated even the ship's insulated cockpit. Samus, now fully encased in her Varia suit, monitored the external sensors as the landscape below came into focus. "Energy signature located," the ship's computer announced. "Coordinates locked. ground-penetrating scan indicates subterranean structure approximately 70 meters below surface level. The ship's view screen displayed a topographical map highlighting a network of tunnels and chambers beneath an unremarkable stretch of desert. At the center of the network pulsed a bright point of energy, the source of the signature that had brought her here. "Any signs of recent activity?" Samus asked, adjusting her suit's environmental settings to compensate for the planet's lower gravity and thin atmosphere. "Negative. No indication of technological activity within the past century based on dust accumulation patterns and structural degradation analysis." Samus guided the ship to a landing site a safe distance from the marked entrance to the underground complex. As the landing struts made contact with the rust-colored soil, clouds of fine dust billowed around the vessel, momentarily obscuring visibility. "Maintain surveillance mode," she instructed the ship's computer. "Alert me to any approaching life forms larger than the local fauna baseline." Acknowledged. Surveillance mode engaged. The airlock hissed open, and Samus stepped onto the surface of Elysium for the first time. Her boots sank slightly into the loose soil, the fine dust immediately coating the lower portion of her suit in a reddish film. The landscape stretched before her, a vast crimson desert under a blood-red sky, broken only by towering rock formations that rose like sentinels in the distance. Her HUD revealed the direction of the subterranean entrance, approximately half a kilometer east of her position. The suit's sensors detected minimal life signs, primarily small reptilian creatures that had adapted to the harsh desert environment, and scattered patches of hardy vegetation that had evolved to thrive on minimal moisture. Samus began moving toward the marked coordinates, each step carefully measured. Despite the lower gravity, the fine dust made walking somewhat treacherous, like traversing a beach of exceptionally loose sand. Her suit automatically adjusted its balance systems to compensate. The entrance to the underground complex was almost invisible until she stood directly before it. A narrow fissure in the base of a modest rock formation, barely wide enough for her to pass through while wearing the Varia suit. Without the precise coordinates, she might have walked past it entirely. "Beginning structural analysis," she murmured, activating her scan visor. The data stream confirmed what she'd suspected. The fissure was not natural, but had been deliberately disguised to appear so. The rock itself had been altered at a molecular level to create the opening while maintaining the appearance of natural formation. "Chozo craftsmanship," she noted, recognizing the technique from similar hidden entrances she'd encountered on Talon 4 and Zebes. The Chozo had always preferred to work with natural materials rather than against them, adapting rather than imposing their will upon their environments. Samus activated her suit's illumination system and stepped into the narrow passage. The walls were smooth, almost polished, bearing faint etchings that her scan visor identified as ceremonial Chozo script, too degraded to translate fully, but containing repeated references to sanctuary and quietude. The passage descended at a gentle angle, winding deeper into the planet's crust. After approximately 50 meters, it widened into a small antechamber adorned with more elaborate carvings. Here, the script was better preserved, depicting what appeared to be a historical narrative. Samus paused to study the images, her suit automatically recording and attempting to translate the ancient text. The carvings told of a group of Chozo who had separated from the main civilization, seeking a place of contemplation away from what they perceived as their species' growing technological hubris. They had come to Elysium specifically for its isolation and harsh beauty, establishing an enclave dedicated to finding balance between their advanced knowledge and the simpler wisdom of natural existence. "Fascinating," she murmured. "A splinter group of philosophical purists." Such divisions within Choso society were rarely documented in the historical records she'd encountered. The notion that some had actively rejected the technological path their civilization was taking added new complexity to her understanding of her adoptive species. Beyond the antechamber, the passage opened into a vast, circular hall that took her breath away. The ceiling soared at least 30 meters above, its surface embedded with countless small crystals that caught and amplified her suit's light, creating the illusion of a starry night sky. The walls were lined with alcoves containing what appeared to be meditation seats carved from the native stone, each facing toward the center of the chamber. And at that center stood the source of the energy signature, a crystalline structure approximately 2 meters tall that pulsed with a soft, amber light. It resembled a tree, with a solid trunk that branched into increasingly delicate formations near its top, each branch terminating in a small, glowing node. Samus approached it cautiously, her scan visor working to analyze its composition and purpose. The readings were unusual. The crystal itself appeared to be an organic technological hybrid, containing elements of both traditional Chozo machinery and biological components. Some kind of data storage device, she wondered aloud, circling the structure. Or perhaps a communication node. As she neared, the crystal's pulsing intensified, its light shifting from amber to a warm gold. Samus stopped, instantly alert to the change. Her experiences with responsive Chozo artifacts had taught her caution. They could be defensive, or they might be attempting to interface with her suit's systems, recognizing the Chozo technology in its design. Before she could decide on a course of action, a soft voice spoke, not through her suit's audio systems, but directly into her mind. "The hatchling returns to the nest." The words were Chozo, in a dialect Samus recognized from her childhood on Zebes. It was a term of endearment Old Bird had often used for her, hatchling, the young one under their protection. "Who's there?" she asked aloud, her arm cannon raised instinctively as she scanned the chamber. "Identify yourself." "We are echo, memory, imprint, not alive, as you understand life, but preserved. We recognize the gifts we gave you, child of two worlds." The crystal pulsed in rhythm with the words, confirming it as the source of the communication. Samus lowered her weapon slightly, but remained alert. "You're a Chozo AI, a stored consciousness. We are the collective wisdom of those who chose this path of quietude. Our physical forms returned to dust centuries ago, but we preserved our understanding here, in this garden of crystal thought, should any seek it." Samus's mind raced with the implications. She had encountered Chozo ghosts before, spectral remnants tied to locations of great trauma or significance. But this was different. This seemed to be a deliberately created repository of consciousness, a library of thought and experience left behind intentionally. "Why are you contacting me now?" The Federation detected energy fluctuations from this location recently. The crystal's light dimmed momentarily, then brightened again. "The balance shifts. The quietude is threatened. We activated the beacon when we sensed the disturbance." "What disturbance?" I've detected no other presence here. Not here, not yet, but approaching. The hunters who would claim what is not theirs to take. A chill ran through Samus, despite her suit's regulated temperature. Space pirates? She asked, though the description could fit numerous threats she'd encountered over the years. They call themselves the Kraken Imperium. They seek weapons, power, dominion. They have detected fragments of our knowledge and misunderstood its purpose. She had encountered the Kraken before, an insectoid species known for their aggressive territorial expansion and their practice of sending young warriors on conquest missions as rites of passage. They were not as organized or persistent as the space pirates, but they were formidable opponents nonetheless, especially in numbers. What have they found that brought them here? What are they after? The crystal pulsed more rapidly, its light taking on a reddish tint that matched the planet's crimson sky. They discovered one of our seed archives on a world they conquered. It contained references to what they have interpreted as weapons. Our studies of energy manipulation and consciousness transference. They do not understand that these were tools for communion, not dominion. Samus processed this information quickly. The Chozo had indeed developed technologies that, in the wrong hands, could be weaponized to devastating effect. Their mastery of energy manipulation had produced her arm cannon and the various beam weapons she utilized. If the Kraken had found information suggesting more powerful applications of these principles, how much time do I have before they arrive? Their advanced scouts already orbit this world. The main force follows within one planetary rotation. Less than a day then. Not enough time to call for Federation support, even if she wanted to involve them in a discovery of this magnitude. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, already calculating strategies and resources. "This sanctuary contains knowledge that must not fall into hands that would misuse it. We cannot destroy ourselves. It is not within our programming parameters. We require your assistance, hatchling." Samus frowned behind her visor. "You want me to destroy this facility? All the knowledge it contains?" "Not destruction, transference. The crystal heart before you can be removed and transported to safety. The secondary systems and archives must be secured against discovery." "And how do I secure them?" "There are 3 stabilization nodes located throughout the complex. Deactivating them in the correct sequence will initiate a controlled structural collapse, sealing the lower chambers where the most sensitive archives are stored. The surface structure, this meditation hall and the connecting passages, will remain intact, but inaccessible without tools and knowledge the Kraken do not possess." It was a solid plan, preserving the most dangerous knowledge while maintaining the facade of the sanctuary. Anyone scanning the site would still detect Chozo architecture, but would likely conclude it was merely a meditation retreat with no strategic value once they couldn't access the deeper chambers. "Show me where these nodes are located," Samus requested. The crystal projected a 3-dimensional map of the complex into her mind, a startlingly intimate method of communication that bypassed her suit's systems entirely. The map revealed a structure far more extensive than she had anticipated, with multiple levels extending deep into the planet's crust. 3 points illuminated on the map, each in a different section of the complex. The nearest was located in what appeared to be a hydroponics chamber, 1 level below her current position. The second was in what the map labeled as memory archives on the eastern side of the complex. The third and final node was in the deepest level, in a chamber simply marked as cradle. I'll deactivate the nodes and return for the crystal, she decided. But I need to know, what exactly does this crystal contain? What knowledge am I preserving by taking it with me? The crystal's light softened to a gentle blue. We contain the complete philosophical and spiritual understanding of the Quietude sect. Our studies of consciousness, energy, and the interconnection of all living things. In the wrong hands, these principles could be corrupted to control minds, to harvest life force, to dominate rather than commune. In the right hands, they offer healing, understanding, and growth. And you trust me with this knowledge. How do you know I'm the right hands? We know you, Samus Aran. We have watched your path through the stars. You have faced the temptation of power many times and chosen preservation over dominion. You carry our blood, our gifts, our responsibility. Who better to guard our legacy? The simple faith in these words struck her more deeply than she expected. Throughout her life as a bounty hunter, she had made countless judgment calls, eliminated threats that others might have exploited, and destroyed power sources that others would have harnessed. It was reassuring, in a way she hadn't realized she needed, to know that the Chozo, or at least this echo of them, approved of those choices. I'll secure the nodes, she promised, but I will need your guidance. You will have it, hatchling, the voice assured. Now, you must move quickly, for there is no time to spare. The hydroponics chamber was a marvel of Chozo bioengineering. Despite centuries of abandonment, the automated systems continued to function, maintaining an enclosed ecosystem where plants from dozens of worlds grew in careful harmony. The air was rich with oxygen and the sweet scent of unfamiliar blossoms. The stabilization node was integrated into the central irrigation system, a crystalline formation similar to the one in the meditation hall, but smaller and emitting a steady green light. Samus approached it cautiously, scanning for defense systems or booby traps, but found none. How do I deactivate it? She asked, knowing the crystal consciousness could still hear her. Place your hand upon it and channel a focused beam of energy through your arm cannon, not to destroy, but to communicate your intent. Samus did as instructed, resting her left hand on the cool surface of the crystal while adjusting her arm cannon to emit a low-power energy beam. As the energy flowed through her suit into the node, the crystal's green light flickered, then dimmed to a faint glow. The first key is turned, the voice confirmed in her mind. Proceed to the memory archives. The eastern passage led her through a series of smaller chambers that appeared to have been living quarters for the Chozo who had inhabited this sanctuary. Unlike the austere meditation hall, these rooms contained personal touches, niches displaying carefully preserved artifacts, wall carvings depicting individual Chozo and their contributions to the community, even what appeared to be artistic creations unique to each inhabitant. It was a side of Chozo life Samus had rarely encountered in her explorations. The Chozo ruins she had investigated on other worlds had typically been research facilities, weapons repositories, or temples, places of collective purpose rather than individual expression. These quarters humanized the Chozo in a way that both comforted and saddened her, reminding her of the family she had lost twice over. The memory archives themselves were housed in a hexagonal chamber whose walls were lined with crystalline storage units, similar to the main structure in the meditation hall, though much smaller. Each unit pulsed with a different colored light, creating a rainbow effect that rippled around the room in slow waves. Each crystal contains the complete memories and knowledge of one of our members, the voice explained. Their experiences, their insights, their wisdom, preserved for future generations to learn from. This is how you maintain your consciousness after so much time, Samus realized. These are your component parts. Yes, we are many and one, individual and collective. The stabilization node maintains the energy field that allows our separate essences to communicate and function as a unified consciousness. The node itself was located at the center of the chamber, a crystalline pedestal that emitted a pure white light. She repeated the deactivation process, feeling a momentary resistance before the light dimmed to a pale silver glow. The second key is turned, the voice acknowledged, though Samus noticed it seemed slightly weaker, more distant. The final node awaits in the cradle. The passage to the deepest level of the complex required her to navigate a series of narrow tunnels that wound downward in a spiral pattern. Unlike the upper levels, which had been carved with obvious care and artistic intent, these passages felt more primordial, as if following natural formations in the planet's bedrock. The air grew warmer as she descended, and her suit's sensors detected increasing levels of geothermal energy. By the time she reached the chamber marked as Cradle on her HUD map, the ambient temperature had risen almost 20 degrees above that of the surface. The chamber took her breath away. It was a perfect sphere, its walls composed of a glossy black material that absorbed and reflected light in equal measure, creating an effect like standing in the center of a dark mirror. The floor was covered in a shallow pool of clear liquid that rippled with the ambient heat, producing soft waves that lapped at the edges of a central platform. On this platform stood the final stabilization node, a crystal unlike the others, shaped not like a tree, but like an egg, pulsing with a deep, ruby light that matched the crimson sky above the planet's surface. Our beginning and our end, the voice explained, now noticeably fainter. The first seed of consciousness planted by our founders, from which all other crystals were grown. Samus waded through the shallow pool, her suit automatically analyzing the liquid and reporting it as a complex nutrient solution, similar to amniotic fluid, but infused with trace elements that her database could not identify. As she approached the final node, she felt a strange resistance, as if moving through a field of increased gravity or magnetic repulsion. Her suit's systems registered no such field, yet the sensation persisted. "There's something different about this one," she observed. "Some kind of protection I can't scan." "It protects itself through connection to our collective consciousness. As the other nodes power down, its defenses intensify. You must overcome this resistance through force of will as much as through your technology." Samus steeled herself and pressed forward, focusing her mind on her purpose. The resistance increased with each step, becoming almost painful as she neared the crystal seed. Her muscles strained against an invisible force, and even her suit's power systems seemed to labor. When she finally reached the platform, she was breathing heavily from the exertion. The crystal seed pulsed more rapidly as she approached, its ruby light taking on an almost aggressive intensity. "Place both hands upon it," the voice instructed. "Your cannon and your touch. Balance of power and connection." She hesitated. "My scan visor isn't detecting any danger, but this feels like a trap." "Not a trap, but a test. The seed must know you before it will yield." With cautious determination, Samus placed her left hand on the smooth surface of the crystal seed while pointing her arm cannon at it with the right. The moment both made contact, a surge of energy flowed through her body, not painful, but intensely disorienting, as if her consciousness was being pulled in multiple directions simultaneously. Images flashed through her mind. The Chozo who had raised her, planets she had never visited, beings she had never met, knowledge she had never learned. It was overwhelming, a flood of information too vast for her mind to process. "Focus," the voice urged, now seeming to come from within her own thoughts rather than externally. "Find your center in the flood." Samus closed her eyes, though it made no difference to the cascade of images. She concentrated on her breathing, on the solid feel of the crystal beneath her hands, on the mission that had brought her here. Gradually, the flood of information receded, becoming a manageable flow rather than a drowning torrent. When she opened her eyes again, the ruby light of the crystal seed had softened to a warm amber glow, similar to the main crystal in the meditation hall. The resistance had vanished, replaced by a sense of acceptance. "What was that?" she asked, her voice steady despite the lingering disorientation. "The seed shared itself with you, as it does with all who would tend to it. It now recognizes you as guardian, not threat. And now, I deactivate it like the others. Yes, but with greater care. This node is the anchor for the entire system. When it powers down, the collapse sequence will begin immediately. You will have limited time to return to the surface and retrieve the primary crystal." Samus adjusted her arm cannon to its lowest power setting and carefully channeled a focused beam of energy into the crystal seed. Unlike the previous nodes, which had dimmed almost immediately, this one seemed to absorb the energy, its glow intensifying briefly before beginning a slow, pulsating fade. "The final key is turned," the voice confirmed, now barely more than a whisper in her mind. "The sanctuary prepares to sleep. Make haste, Guardian." A low rumble shook the chamber, and her visor displayed a proximity alert, micro tremors indicating the beginning of structural shifts throughout the complex. This wasn't a violent collapse, but rather a carefully engineered reconfiguration, sealing off sections and rearranging access points to protect the most sensitive areas. Samus activated her speed booster and raced back through the winding tunnels, now increasingly challenging to navigate as subtle shifts in the walls narrowed passages and occasionally blocked familiar routes entirely. Her suit's mapping system continuously updated, finding alternative paths where necessary. By the time she reached the memory archives, the changes were more pronounced. The hexagonal chamber was sealing itself, the crystal storage units retracting into protected niches in the walls. The silver glow of the deactivated node had faded entirely, leaving the room illuminated only by her suit's lights. The hydroponics chamber had undergone an even more dramatic transformation. The plants had withdrawn into specialized containment pods, and the irrigation system had drained completely. The chamber itself was compressing, the ceiling gradually lowering as structural supports shifted to form a protective shell around the preserved ecosystem. When Samus finally reached the meditation hall, she found it largely unchanged, except for the state of the central crystal. It had detached from its base and now hovered slightly above the floor, pulsing with a steady golden light. "Take it," the voice instructed, now so faint that she had to concentrate to hear it. "We will guide you no further. Our consciousness returns to dormancy to preserve energy." Samus approached the crystal carefully. It was larger than she had initially estimated, nearly as tall as she was in her Varia suit, and likely weighing several hundred kilograms despite its delicate appearance. Yet as she reached for it, she discovered it moved with surprising ease, as if it had adjusted its mass to accommodate transport. "Thank you for trusting me with this," she breathed, securing the crystal carefully against her side. "I'll ensure it remains safe." There was no response from the voice, but the crystal pulsed once with increased brightness, an acknowledgement or farewell. The rumbling had intensified, and her scans indicated that the entrance passage was beginning to shift. She activated her speed booster again and raced through the narrowing corridor, the crystal somehow adapting to her movements, neither impeding her progress nor sustaining damage from the rapid pace. She emerged onto the surface of Elysium just as the fissure entrance sealed itself behind her, the rock formation rippling briefly before settling into a configuration that revealed no hint of the passage that had existed moments before. To any observer, it would now appear to be simply another unremarkable rock formation in the Crimson Desert. Samus's heads-up display flashed a warning. Her ship had detected approaching spacecraft entering the planet's atmosphere. The Kraken Advance scouts had arrived, exactly as the crystal consciousness had predicted. With the crystal secured against her side, she sprinted across the loose red soil toward her gunship. Her suit compensated for the additional weight and awkward shape of her burden, maintaining her balance and speed as clouds of dust billowed in her wake. The ship's systems activated remotely as she approached, the entry ramp extending to receive her. Samus bounded up the ramp and into the cargo hold, carefully securing the crystal in a reinforced containment field designed for transporting sensitive artifacts. Multiple vessels detected entering atmosphere, the ship's computer announced. Configuration matches known Kraken scout ships. Estimated time to visual range, 3 minutes. "Initiate launch sequence," she commanded, moving swiftly to the cockpit. "Stealth systems at maximum." The ship hummed to life around her, engines powering up as the external sensors continuously tracked the approaching Kraken vessels. They appeared to be heading directly for the location of the now sealed sanctuary entrance. Their intelligence had been accurate, even if they were now too late to claim their prize. Samus guided her ship into a low trajectory that kept a large rock formation between her and the approaching Kraken scouts. The vessel's stealth systems would mask its energy signature, but visual detection remained a risk until she could achieve sufficient altitude to engage the FTL drive. Plot a course to Calliope Station, she instructed the computer. We'll need a secure location to study this artifact. Calliope Station was a research outpost operated by a former Federation scientist Samus had worked with in the past. Located in a remote asteroid field, it maintained independence from both Federation oversight and criminal enterprises, making it ideal for sensitive research. As her ship climbed through Elysium's crimson atmosphere, Samus caught a glimpse of the Kraken scouts landing near the former sanctuary entrance. Their insectoid vessels, with sharp angular designs reminiscent of their creators' exoskeletons, settled onto the red soil in a precise formation. Soon they would discover that their prize had been sealed away beyond their reach, and that someone had beaten them to whatever remained accessible. They'll track us, she murmured to herself. The Kraken were persistent hunters, and they would not abandon their quest easily. But she had evaded more determined pursuers in the past. Once clear of the atmosphere, she engaged a series of randomized jump sequences, a tactic she had developed to confuse tracking systems. Each jump lasted only seconds before the ship re-emerged in normal space, changed direction, then jumped again. It was taxing on the engines, but virtually impossible to follow. After the fifth jump, when her sensors confirmed no pursuit, Samus set the final course to Calliope Station and engaged the autopilot. Only then did she remove her helmet, running a hand through her sweat-dampened blonde hair as she exhaled slowly. The mission had taken an unexpected turn, as they so often did. What had begun as a simple investigation of an energy signature had resulted in her becoming the guardian of an ancient Chozo consciousness and all the knowledge it contained. Samus made her way back to the cargo hold, where the crystal pulsed with a steady golden light within its containment field. As she approached, the light brightened slightly, acknowledging her presence. "I hope I made the right choice," she said quietly. Preserving knowledge is always a risk. Even knowledge meant for peace can be twisted toward war in the wrong hands. The crystal didn't respond verbally, the consciousness within apparently remaining dormant as promised, but its light pulsed in a pattern that somehow conveyed reassurance. She smiled faintly. "Rest now. We've got a long journey ahead." Samus returned to the cockpit and settled into the pilot's chair, allowing herself to relax slightly as the stars streaked past the view screen. The Kraken would not give up easily, and she would need to be vigilant in the days ahead. But for now, at least, an important piece of Chozo heritage was safe. As her ship carried her through the vast emptiness of space, Samus reflected on the words the crystal consciousness had spoken to her. "You have faced the temptation of power many times and chosen preservation over dominion." It was true, though she rarely thought of her choices in such terms. Her path had always been guided by a simple principle: protect what deserves protection, preserve what deserves preservation, and never allow power to fall into hands that would misuse it. Today, she honored that principle once again. Whether it would lead to greater wisdom or unforeseen consequences remained to be seen. But as the guardian of the crystal and all it contained, Samus would ensure that whatever knowledge it held would be approached with the same respect and care that the Chozo themselves had intended. The crimson world of Elysium receded behind her, its secrets once again sealed beneath its rust-colored soil, while she carried forward a different kind of legacy, not weapons or power, but understanding. In her experience, that was often the most valuable discovery of all. On Calliope Station, 3 weeks later, Samus stood before the crystal in a specially constructed containment chamber. Dr. Eliza Verne, the station's founder and chief researcher, had helped her design an environment that mimicked the conditions of the Chozo Sanctuary: controlled temperature, specific light wavelengths, and a carefully calibrated energy field to sustain the crystal's unique properties. The preliminary analysis is fascinating, Dr. Verne said, reviewing data on a holographic display. The crystal appears to be a hybrid organic technological system unlike anything I've encountered before. It's generating its own energy through what I can only describe as a form of quantum photosynthesis. Samus nodded, her attention fixed on the crystal itself rather than the data. Since arriving at the station, it had remained dormant, its light pulsing steadily but offering no further communication. She had begun to wonder if the consciousness within had truly entered a permanent sleep state, or if it was simply observing, waiting for something specific before awakening again. "What about the information it contains?" she asked. "Have you been able to access any of it?" Dr. Verne shook her head, her grey-streaked dark hair falling across her face. "Not directly. The data structure is too alien for our current interfaces. We've detected massive information storage capacity, but the encryption is beyond our capability to decode." She glanced at Samus with a knowing expression. "I suspect it might respond differently to you, given what you've told me about your experience on Elysium." Samus approached the crystal, removing her gloves to place her bare hand against its smooth surface. The material felt warm and almost soft, despite its apparent solidity. She closed her eyes, focusing on the connection she had felt in the sanctuary, trying to recreate that moment of communication. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then, so faintly that she almost missed it, a whisper touched her mind. "Patience, Guardian. The time for awakening approaches, but is not yet here. Others seek us still." Samus opened her eyes, finding Dr. Verne watching her with keen interest. "It spoke to you, didn't it?" the scientist asked. "Briefly," she confirmed. "It's aware, but conserving energy. And it warned that we're still being pursued." Dr. Verne's expression grew concerned. "The Kraken? You're certain your trail was covered?" "As certain as I can be, but they're persistent." Samus stepped back from the crystal, its light dimming slightly as she broke physical contact. "We should increase security protocols and limit knowledge of what we're studying here. The fewer people who know about the crystal, the better." "Agreed. I'll restrict access to this section to just you and me for now." Dr. Werner hesitated, then added, "If this consciousness contains what you believe it does, a complete philosophical and spiritual database from an isolated Chozo sect, it could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness itself. The potential applications for healing trauma, expanding awareness, perhaps even preserving human consciousness beyond physical death. That's exactly why it needs protection," Samus interrupted gently. "Those same technologies could be weaponized to control minds, to extract information against someone's will, to create soldiers who feel no fear or remorse." She shook her head. The Chozo of the Quietude sect understood this danger. It's why they isolated themselves, why they created this consciousness as a guardian of knowledge rather than a teacher. Dr. Verne nodded slowly. Knowledge at the wrong time can be as dangerous as knowledge in the wrong hands. I understand. She smiled wryly. It's just difficult for a scientist to accept the idea that some discoveries should wait. Not wait forever, Samus clarified, just until we can ensure they'll be used wisely. She looked back at the crystal, its golden light pulsing with what she now recognized as a pattern similar to breathing. Inhale, exhale, a rhythm of life sustained through centuries. The Chozo believed in balance above all else. Technology and nature, power and restraint, knowledge and wisdom. We'd do well to honor that philosophy. Dr. Verne touched a control panel, adjusting the containment field to optimize the crystal's energy signature. Well, Guardian, it seems you have a new mission. Not destruction or combat, but preservation and protection. She glanced at Samus with a hint of amusement. A change of pace for the galaxy's most famous bounty hunter. Samus smiled slightly. Not entirely new. The best missions have always been about protecting what matters, not just eliminating threats. She placed her hand on the crystal once more, feeling a faint warmth pulse through her fingers. And sometimes, the most valuable discoveries are the ones we choose not to exploit. As if in agreement, the crystal's light brightened momentarily, casting golden reflections across the chamber. In that brief illumination, Samus saw not just her own reflection, but a glimpse of something more. Shadows that resembled Chozo forms, watching over their legacy and its new guardian, with what she could only interpret as approval. The light faded back to its steady pulse, but the impression remained with Samus, as she and Dr. Verne left the chamber to make their security arrangements. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Kraken hunters, Federation interest, or other forces that might seek the crystal's power, she was committed to her role as guardian of this ancient wisdom. It was, after all, what the Chozo had prepared her for throughout her life. Not just to fight, but to judge when fighting was necessary. Not just to destroy threats, but to preserve balance. Under the crimson sky of Elysium, she had accepted a new aspect of that responsibility, one that might shape her path among the stars for years to come. And as Calliope Station drifted through the asteroid field that concealed it from casual discovery, the crystal waited patiently, its consciousness dormant but not extinguished, its knowledge preserved for a future that might be ready to receive it with wisdom rather than ambition. For now, that future remained distant, but with Samus Aran as its guardian, it remained possible. And, in the quiet of space, that possibility was